game, he never actually relates in the same like context as how we judge our own thoughts about the game. Because I've noticed all those fans on Reddit who always say things like, oh, like, I'll give you an example, right? If it was Crumbz, well, the problem they have there, Zaboutine, is Crumbz was actually a pro player and has been a caster for many years. So they'd never say, well, he doesn't even know anything about the game. They'd just switch to like, oh, he doesn't know like modern League of Legends. And, like he hasn't, he's just giving like old opinions that don't count. Then if it was you, Zaboutine, well, obviously you must know something about the game, you're a coach. So then they'd go to, but is he even challenger now? Does he actually know the game's played? So they always have like different fucking criteria I've noticed for every single person. And they never, this is what I'm pointing out, they never ever bother to add at the end of the comment, by the way, that they've met that right criteria and therefore they are qualified. Like, by the same logic, right? If me not know, like, because for me, they say it all, can't they? I wasn't a pro player, not an expert, don't know League, the game. It's like, what qualifies this fucking random guy to know the game? Isn't just a guy on Reddit? Like, but the problem is we do all do that, I have to say. We all fall into those traps.
It's a carousel of flame, and it starts at the bottom with this guy just doesn't know shit, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then once they move on from that, when you challenge that you do know what you're talking about, then they're like, you know what, he just sucks. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I just don't like this guy. Yes. And then we goes back to, all right, maybe we like him a bit, and then some dude's like, you know what, I heard him say this, and I don't think he knows what he's talking about. And it just goes from you don't know what you're talking about to you just suck.
I don't actually even know, by the way, why they even need to go with the whole like you don't know anything. Like if they actually just said, I think he sucks, I'll give everyone a spoiler. You can actually know loads about the game and be really good at the game. Or if I don't like it, I think you suck. I can just think you suck. Like, it's not actually a problem. I think loads of pro players suck.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. When you meet them in person, like I had like moments where I met actually haters, in person, and then like, oh, you're completely wrong about the game. I'm like, oh, what's the reason? I always ask the questions like, what's the reason? And just pinpoint one specific thing you say that got proven wrong like 3 years after or like 3 months after. I was like, yeah, you see, you were wrong. I'm like, yeah, sure, I was wrong. So that's the proof. Is like, yeah, and then you try to try to challenge them, and if they're like, oh no, I never said like nothing about the game. I just thought you were wrong. I'm like, that's a very different thing. And then they kind of like say, oh, can I get a photo with you? And then they're like smile and they just turn into their friends, and that's it.
Okay,
that's just
the only real hater I ever encountered in years of esports has been an Overwatch fan. Never had as a single League player actually came up to me and was shit talking. It was only an Overwatch fan, and to be fair, I thought he was justified. I was doing a shit job at this event, so he was the only one that was like, "Boo, boo, get these casters up."
Okay, fair enough that you actually gave it up. But you said, you were in many ways you were worthy of being fucking pelted with the rotten tomatoes or that one, right? Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Then. Right, any fucking campaign in it, right? So what we're gonna do is. This show, on some of the past ones, I was more focused on just getting the show done each week and have a different guest and keep, getting it up and running. But I'm trying to make it a little bit more in line with what I actually said on the first ever episode, the one I had with Wicked and Amazing, where I pointed out that what I wanted to do with this show to make it a little bit different is we'll still talk about topical stuff and obviously key teams we'll discuss. But I don't want it to be just a show where every week is like, right, what happened to Fnatic this week, right? What's FlyQuest up there? It's like more like I want to talk about teams specifically if there's a topical thing about them. Or the other thing I want to do, and we've got a bunch for this one, is take things that people already are discussing in the community, but everyone knows social media, Reddit, it's not the best platform to have discussions on. It tends to be people just saying things that are popular, having stupid arguments. So have real discussions. So a massive topic that lines right up with what I just said, people will even have seen it talked about on a bunch of shows, but I think there's a lot of angles we can go with, is obviously the CLG. I mean, the simple way to say it is let's just say like, misaligned, miscommunicated, badly timed sponsored segment, which is probably the most heinous part of it, with Bud Light, where basically the vibe of it was like this if people didn't see it. They sort of tried to show you what looked like it could have been, by the way, a clip from like, one of those reality shows like a TSM Legends or something. But in this specific clip, it was essentially the general manager, so basically the guy who decides who is hired and fired within CLG, just saying to their current League of Legends squad, which understandably have a pretty poor record, and I'm sure a lot of them who, by the way, not a lot of them are paid pretty well, are worried about their jobs right now, essentially just telling them this might be the last time you all play together. Didn't even then specify who might be kicked, and then just sort of was like, I thought that was like, I'll admit at the beginning, I'll say the same thing I said on my other talk shows. I genuinely don't actually really understand what the premise the CLG was trying to do with this was. Like I genuinely don't know, Crumbz, whether or not they thought that this would be like I can't tell if they were trying to do it to show, like, we're serious and, like, this is why we're telling our players that, performance is necessary. And that was a way to, like, offset the results. Or I can't tell. Part of me actually feels, as fucked up as this sounds, because I know no one on Reddit has this take, part of me almost feels like the guy doing it, the general manager guy, thinks he's doing them a favour. That, like, he actually thinks he's being kind by telling them, like, you might be fired in, like, a week. And he's sort of, like, telling them, like, I'm giving you a chance, a warning to sort of, like, get your game up. Or I can't really tell. Like, where did you come out down on this story, Crumbz?
I think there's a lot of signs to this story that just show you how shit it is. Because the first thing is the lack of communication, that the org itself doesn't really know who is who. That the post is saying the coach is telling them that they are being replaced, but it's the GM. So already there's a confusion going on among the team and who is actually running this organization. I really don't like that approach that they took. Like, I think it's kind of what you said. It's like, oh, I'm doing you guys a favor. I'm telling you all up front that, hey, you might be replaced. Now, I heard how Amazing had phrased it and that he prefers the slow burn. Hey, problem has been addressed from weeks ago. This is something we need you to work on. It's not happening. We're going to get rid of you. Or we're going to try somebody new, because that's sort of where Monty also lied. And I like that approach much better. I am a big proponent of don't flame in public, right? It's better to just, like, why are you telling all of your players that they might be replaced? Like, the morale is dead because now everyone is worried for their job. No one knows who's safe. Right? So if you had a player in mind, if you had a few players that you were looking at, it's like, hey, we're looking at these kinds of players, talk to them 1v1. I think that would have worked a lot better for them. So it showed me a lack of people skills within CLG, showed me a lack of responsibility between the coach and the GM, because I don't see why the GM needs to take this. Like, why is the coach not getting involved here? Why is the coach not saying, hey, don't tell these guys to my players? Like, these are my players. I will handle this. Right? Like, where is this line coming down? This is not the owner. This is just the GM saying this, and it's not doing it in a tactful way. So already the chain of command within CLG is looking already broken. And I just don't think that this is the right way to approach players being replaced. I think because you didn't have set metrics that you wanted to accomplish, and we know this because they said that they wanted a 3-0 and they didn't get a 3-0. So it's already clearly some sort of results-based analysis. They don't have some sort of, hey, each player needs to accomplish this every week. Each player needs these responsibilities for every single day of practice, every single game. So I wanted to see, hey, if you're a jungler, I need you to be on top of every camp timer, right? I need you to be on top of these kinds of rotations. These are your responsibilities within the game. And so we can go down the list. Hey, we told you when the game started or when the split started, these were the things you needed to do. Every single game, we have evidence of you not being able to improve at them or just dropping the ball altogether. We didn't even need to tell you. You knew that this would happen. This is a competitive sport. So that shows me that CLG just didn't have a plan altogether. And then it gets even spicier when Exogen, the coach, comes out and says, yeah, the problem comes from the top down. It's MSG putting this thing in. Kudos to the CLG guys that thought that, hey, this is going to get us some clicks for Bud Light. Like, for sure, it got you promotion more than anything else CLG has done. I bet you that single event got them more impressions than they could have gotten the whole year combined. So it was their most successful PR stunt.
Right, Zaboutine, obviously I should mention the context that, like, the reason I'm very interested in your take on this is you yourself have been on both ends of this equation. So when you were in Optic was the period of time when people might remember Optic basically sort of cycled through a whole bunch of players because you had that, like, lineup where you had, like, in theory it was like, I think it was supposed to be like a 10-man roster, right? It was like an academy and an LEC squad you could swap between. So you've obviously handled individual benchings of players and mix and match. And then when you were on Immortals, you obviously were on the other end of the equation where they did just bench you and your whole team and people just sort of got fired mid-split. So what's your take on this one? I want to see what you thought of this.
I mean, I think there is two very, very clear and different aspects of it. I think the first one that has been mentioned very well by Crumbz is the sports aspect, is the way you want to treat the issue, like the sport issue. How do you treat the fact that you're going to bench people? And the other one is like making it public. So on the first one, I mean, I've been handling benches myself, and it's never something easy to do because, I mean, even if they are not making the best and like players always feel like they're trying their best, right? That's the feeling like 99% of the players will have is like, I'm trying hard, but it's not like converting into like results, and therefore I'm kind of lost. And I feel like sometimes because you have a short deadline, like because time is the most important resource within the season, you kind of like have to make this decision of benching a player, which is never pleasant because you still see the efforts, and you try your best, but that's something you do one-on-one. Like you make the decision with your staff. I mean, on my side, I've always asked to my general manager, whether it was Romain or it was Keaton, I was like, I handle the sports decisions, because if you hire me to have an expertise on the game and you overlap, then you have the expertise on the game, and it cannot work, right? You have the expertise on the process, on the performance thing, but what's happening in the game should belong to the head coach. So I always like made the decisions when it was coming to a bench, aside from like the whole Immortal when I got like fired. Yes. And on the other hand, I mean, it was very sudden, the Immortal situation, so it was kind of different. It's very hard. I think it's very important to keep a certain level of PR when things happen. For instance, what happened to me with Immortals, if it was made public, like everything was made public today, I think it would be completely different that it happened within the season, right? Like, for instance, if CLG was filming all of that and tried to publish it at the end of the year when everybody is cooling down, everybody found a job, and you want to say a year in review, but you can't be perfectly transparent and perfectly on time when you deliver the thing. So that's my second point, right? So whatever, and no matter how mishandled it was from the sports perspective, let's assume it was even well managed, you can't film a bench and publish it the day or the week after. You can do it at the end of the split or at the end of the season when this has no impact anymore. For me, that's the biggest thing, and I think that this is where you see that people within the company, and this is where you can put the MSG thing, is like they are doing their job and they think they have a great idea, so they just go and they just do it and they publish it. But you see that there is no connection, there is no passion about what's going on within the team. Like there is not like every small silo within the company is working by themselves, but there is no vision on top that's trying to assemble everything into a sports project. And if you compare that to, I don't know, 100 Thieves, like the media is well incorporated into the sports and everything, like everybody talks to each other. So these kind of things have a very low chance of happening, or I would say lower chance of happening. So I think just the idea of publishing it on just after it happens, like really baffles me. Even putting aside the sports management, where you don't really want to go to your 5-player and say they're going to be benches, because like punishing has never been motivating anyone, like ever.
Actually, along those lines, go on, Crumbz.
The thing I'm most cynical about this thing is the wording at the end. Is like, I love you guys. That just rubs me the wrong way. Just throwing that out there. Hey, I just shit on all of you.
I know.
Don't worry about it.
I feel like this is very American, though. I feel like it's very American.
It's a problem I have with all. Like, it's not like I see it before, and it's just a use of the word so poorly. It does happen a lot here, but it's just, I hate seeing that. It really rubs me the wrong way. Just telling, oh yeah, love you guys, love you, don't worry. Come on.
I feel like it's very, I mean, from a French person, so we are known to be pretty bold living in the US. I feel like when you have a bad talk with your management, whether you work in esports or any company, right? I was working in finance for 6 years before switching to full-time esports. Like, when you have a difficult talk with your management, whether you're the management or you're the manager, it ends up with, I'm sorry this happens, but we have to make it work. So I hope this will change, and everybody takes responsibility for what they do. And there is kind of an awkward silence, and everybody walks out and you just move on. But I feel like within the American culture, you have to be extra polite, because that's how, especially in West Coast, that's how people are, that I would say less bold. So it ends up in this weird situation where just on the name of being polite, you have these words that don't really correlate to the situation, but like there is a lack of tools to just leave this awkward silence, because it's just not culturally accepted, and ends up being very weird.
I think that's just lack of like use of the language by the people doing it, because just saying I love you is not being polite. Like, that's just not, like, I
sounds insincere as well when you basically said someone's fired. Like, it sounds a bit insincere, doesn't it? Like, I'm gonna love you even though you're not working there anymore. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Was that even mean then in that scenario? What is your love worth? Like, it's a bit like the other thing people love to do. This is like a more of a society thing. But as I always hated it, for example, if you're getting fired or something, you're getting disciplined, and then someone just throws in like, sorry. It's like, well, I can't fucking take sorry to the bank and cash it and pay my rent. Kind of like, oh, does that help me? Like, just fucking do it better, or just say tough shit, you know? I'd rather just deal with it. One thing I want to ask both of you before we move on, 'cause after this we'll transition, we'll talk about CLG the org actually, because as you say, the MSG comment's quite telling actually when you think of CLG the last few years. But one thing I want to ask you both before we move on is this: what do you think about just the angle of like, what if he'd have done this what if the same thing happened, there was just no video that we saw? So what if the guy who's the general manager did this, but privately he just told the players, look, you know, this might be the last week you play again. Like you said there, Zaboutine, you prefer to do it one-on-one, etc. Like, do you think it's actually a problem that he did it in front of the group? Like, do you think, what do you think on that topic? Because that was one thing I want to get a sense of.
There's two things. The thing is the moment they are in the room just after going on stage or something. So it's very too early. Like there is too much emotion. You need to cool down, you need to review. And I think that, as Crumbz said, you need to align it with something that has been preemptively, like you need to challenge the people on doing something, and then you compare the reality with what they've done. You can't just come and say, oh, we lost, so obviously and the second thing is you don't want to address such a drastic thing towards everybody at the same time, because players, the confidence and the trust the players have and the will they have to actually challenge themselves on bettering their play, if they feel like from one day to the other they can be benched, no matter how good they are, no matter how hard they try, just be based on the end result, there is a very high chance they're not going to give their best, or because the fright of actually getting fired or benched is just going to block them. So I feel like treating that immediately after the stage and in front of the whole group is going to have, like, there is a very high chance if one of your players suck, the other ones no, you know. If there is one player that's actually not working or behaving or being good at the game, the four other can recognize that. So if this player is specifically changed, and the other players are going to receive that as like, oh, okay, so the management knows that like some players underperforming and they're trying to change it, and they're going to feel encouraged. But if you come and after a lose, so everybody gets hurt, and you say, no, some people are going to get benched. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you, maybe it's him. Maybe I should have not died here and not flashed for my teammate because now I look bad. And this whole thing, that's what we're mentioning on the previous video. And you play for yourself. So I think it's just treating these things like in front of a group. And if I had done this in my past, teams, it was really garbage. I think it should never happen.
Okay. Yeah, I also think that it shouldn't happen in public in general. Like, you just need to talk to the individuals that you're actually considering, because if you're at the position where you're legitimately considering benching all 5 and you're looking for 5 replacements, then, I mean, you're already so fucked. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. You're probably addressing a few key members. Like, you probably weren't going to bench Finn. You probably weren't going to bench Wild Turtle at the very least. So maybe the selection would have been 3 other players. So you don't even need to involve those others. I think that you got to keep it in private. And if you really want to have these kinds of discussions and you want to address the group as a whole for something larger, like Zaboutine said, you got to involve the coach as well, because now you're undermining the coach's authority. It's the same problem that we had with TSM way back in the day when Reggie would come in and try to coach the team and undermine the coach every single time. And then why would the players go back to believing the coach when at the end of the day somebody else can come in and say, all right, scratch that, what I say matters? So I think that you have to have Moon involved in that, right? The fact that Moon is not there, is not telling this to the players in the video, is a big problem for me. And I don't know if it happened before, but what we saw did not look like that.
Right, if we transition this a little bit, why don't we talk about CLG, but not like the current form of the team, blah, blah, blah. What I thought we'd talk about is basically what you alluded to there, actually, with the comment by the former coach, ex-Sojin, who was apparently the academy coach. It was the academy coach, right, Zaboutine? Yeah, okay. Right, basically, when he says that it's not really, like, his tweet was almost like, it's not CLG, it's more like the Madison Square Garden side of it. And if people don't know, obviously those are the people, like, I'll give people a quick history lesson. CLG was actually one of the North American endemic orgs, funnily enough, like some of the other more successful ones, Cloud9, TSM, that held on almost as long as possible before taking the VC money, basically. Unlike the likes of Team Liquid, who very quickly sort of took loads of that money, and actually, by the way, I'd even say they sort of did that thing, you spend money to make money sort of thing, you know, they spend very well, and they got themselves a better position. CLG tried to do what they're, like I say, the other big 2 have C9 and Team Liquid, TSM were doing, which is wait as long as possible. But then when you need to, because you just have to be able to actually buy players, you start taking the VC around, funnily enough, the franchising era, because you need the $10 million buy-in fee. And they thought, right, we've timed it perfectly, because if you go and you look at TSM, at Cloud9, I think they did a very good job, actually, of how they gradually introduced the VC money. It's like they sort of weighed up in the League of Legends aspect. Like, we're still Cloud9 and TSM. Like, we can still get the players. So as long as we're, like, vaguely close, you know, we can make up for it in the short term. Then they took the VC money. But as a result, you don't dilute yourself too much. You don't sell it all off instantly and then find out, you know, in 3 years it's worth loads more. The problem is this, CLG took that money on, but unlike those other orgs, if anything, they've just nosedived since then. Like, if people don't remember, franchising in LCS was a year before LEC, so it was actually Season 8. It was 2018 that franchising began. Now, if you think of where CLG, the org, was at then, they'd actually had that period where they'd been underwhelming for all those years of LCS. Then they had those 2 splits where they were champions back-to-back. One with Doublelift, one with Stixxay. Then they had the MSL Finals run. Like, at that point in time, if you put a pin after that MSI Finals, it's like, dude, they've almost caught TSM up. Like, at that point in time, you know, TSM's only on, like, some, like, 3 or 4 championships. Cloud9's won, like, 3. You know, like, at that point in time, like, wow, CLG's back in business. Ever since then, and especially this franchising era. So I'll tell you the stats right now. Since franchising began in Season 8, CLG has finished 7th and 8th in Season 8, didn't make a playoffs. In Season 9, they were 7th, and then they had the one good split this summer, where they came 3rd, and they were even close to potentially going to Worlds. And then last year, they were 10th and 9th, and then in the spring this year, they were 9th, and obviously this year's a bit weird because the summer split connects, but they've got one of the worst records in the league. So if you look in the franchising era, they've been pretty bad. And as I alluded to earlier when I made the comment about this roster, one of the reasons that this current roster doesn't look bad on paper is it isn't cheap. These aren't like minimum, like veteran minimum type salaries. Like, some of these people are getting paid legit money. So I have to say, the thing I found a bit underwhelming about CLG, and I want to ask you guys about it, is they aren't, as far as I know, a team that had no money. Like, as far as I know, they've even had periods where they potentially, I even heard a rumour, by the way, in the off-season of last year, coming into this year, that they were going to try and make a super team. They were one of these teams putting big offers out there, but it was one of those ones where, unless, like, you know, the first 3 players say, yes, you don't make the team, obviously you don't waste the money on the ancillary players, as you might say. So I have to say, one thing immediately I look at, aside from the results, is I look at the players they've had, and like, man, this is underwhelming. Where the fuck are all the big signings? Like, even the names that they get that are big are basically when the only player I can actually tell during this franchising era that they signed who was actually good at the time was actually the guy from Zaboutine's team, was Crown. That was about the only player who was in good form who joined CLG. Everyone else, even if they're a name, is joining because they're in a bad position in their career, because they've just had like a bad year somewhere else, because they maybe even got fired from their job. Like, they haven't even signed good players. So Crumbz, start me out on the. Oh yeah, go on then, Zaboutine, if you want to start.
Power people. I think power people, like they got they got back-to-back my mid laners, and both of them were pretty good at the game.
True, but I'll say in this case, I'll also say, to be fair, Power of Evil also like wasn't as hyped. I think it was actually the CLG year he got his hype back again. So yeah, I'll give you some of that. Right, what do you think on this Zaboutine? Because I have to say, like I say, when you set it up like that, it sounds bad. Like just the results, the names, the org doesn't sound like it's in a great place. What do you think?
That's a very generic question. If Crumbz want to start, like I don't mind, because my answers were gonna be pretty long.
All right.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing is, who wants to play for CLG, right? You're talking about these big names, and the question is, why do I want to join CLG? Like, there's nothing there except money, right? If you're looking to win, there's other orgs that clearly have a better track record. So you've got TSM, you've got Cloud9, you've got TL, who seem to be much more dedicated about winning, have been more serious about it this whole time. Then you have 100 Thieves, who's clearly trying. EG seems to have come into the space with a really good plan. Old-time esports org, been very successful thus far. I mean, they haven't yet to win, but this looks like a promising split. So when I'm trying to join CLG, what do I have going on for me besides money? There's nothing. There's nothing. So CLG has to pay more because there is just no other incentive that the players want for the team. So then they're coming into an organization without even the desire to try to win. CLG ends up overpaying to overcompensate the fact that they're not adding value beyond money. And so the players look like shit because there's nothing else going on for the organization right now. And so I think the best move that they might have done was the acquisition of Greg Kim, who was the first hire that EG got when they joined the LCS. So they hired a former Rioter to join the LCS, and I think what he did was he hired all the pieces that then are thriving right now. So he approved all of the hires that currently established the systems for Evil Geniuses, and now I guess once those have already been set, he figured, well, what does CLG have that any other org doesn't have? All that money. They've got nothing else to offer. It's my job to build what they have to offer. So I think that this acquisition might prove effective for CLG in the long term, at least in a year's time, but we'll have to see how strong Madison Square Garden is. But the fact that they pay more, I think, is just a symptom of the fact that they have nothing else to offer. If 100 Thieves paid much less than CLG, I bet you a lot of amateur and academy teams would not think twice about joining that organization because they think I have a better chance to go for a long and successful career here than on a team like CLG, where I might look like trash. And what are the odds that somebody believes me that I'm still good?
Yeah, I mean, I think on top of what Crumbz said, which is very true, I think there is one thing that I've said when I joined Optic the first time, and I still believe that's the case in esports. You wanna invest big, or you don't want to invest at all, because you have as many factors when you hit an off season, and the first thing is the liquidity of player. There is not that many players that are available, knowing that you have 2 limited import slots, especially like when they hit franchise, because now there is like OPL and stuff that like kind of enrich the market of players. But you need to make sure that you can build a team with a lot of money that's going to be competitive. Otherwise, it's not worth getting 1 or 2 to kind of like be average and overspend on 1 year, where you can probably like trying to go with maybe a lower budget like team, just a development team for a year or 2, and hit the market when it's really worth. Like, for instance, if you take the example of FlyQuest, they did a rebrand the year they had probably one of the biggest. I mean, they had great names, so I expect them to have a big payroll when they had. They had Power of Evil, they had White Turtle, they had Thorin, right? I don't remember. They had Solo, and they had Ignore. So they reunited PoE and Ignore for Misfits, and they went on pretty, I would say, aggressive off season, and they decided to make their rebrand and try to bring something on the table in NA for a year. And guess what? It worked. Like, people were speaking about FlyQuest, the initiative were great, and like this year they kind of like dropped. So there is no continuity, which is the second aspect we will probably mention. But that's the kind of thing we want to do. CLG has kind of invested builds here and there on like some key players and tried to do things, but they never tried to assemble a long-term plan that involves like securing pillars that you're gonna keep working with, and then at the right moment invest the extra money from your VC to be able to be as competitive as the top orgs that are gonna attract the best player regardless. And there have been a lot of change in the coaching staffs. Like, there is no continuity in the coaching staff. There have been a lot of changes in the academy, and there have been a lot of change in the position CLG wanted to be within the LCS and even in North American esports. If you compare it to Golden Guardians have made the decision. I'm pretty sure that Golden Guardians, if they wanted to go like super big or something, they could. But Golden Guardians is selling their players. Like, you can't compare for me Golden Guardians and CLG, because Golden Guardians, they sold their good teams. So when they sell the whole team to one of the Thieves, they're kind of looking forward to make it to be a development team, right? So that Golden Guardians is going to be kind of the development team. CLG, on the other hand, you really don't know. Like, you hire Crown, and then you get Power of Evil, and at some point you get another player. And just this lack of continuity shows that there is no vision from the upper management on saying, we buy a slot. This slot is an asset. We want to kind of make it grow, and even if you want to sell it, or even if you want to keep it in maintenance, knowing that the market's even doing nothing, the market is going to raise. There is no vision from the owner of CLG. That's what you see from the workers there, from the communication, from the miscontinuity in management, and the discontinuity in player base, and eventually a huge brand just becomes something that. Becomes kind of a joke to the fans, and that hurts to see that from CLG. But I feel like it's a lot of lack of involvement and lack of vision from the top, and it has to come top down.
I have heard from other coaches as well, former coaches of CLG besides ex-Sojin, the same issues that he made public. It's the management is just not is not allowing the team to thrive. It interferes with the day-to-day in a way that isn't actually allowing anything or anybody to have a set vision. So they're like, it's almost bureaucratic in that no one can have a plan, but at the same time, you have to follow our plan, which is no plan at all.
I mean, the obvious, hilarity of it all is, I would say, on the one hand, Crumbz, you'd think the Madison Square Garden group would understand the sports aspect, but if people know, the sports teams they've been involved with, obviously, famously, they get super criticised, like the Knicks and the fucking... I mean, actually, the Rangers were pretty well run, but the Knicks was a nightmare for, 30 years at this point in time. But the part I don't get ties into what you both actually said, which is... What I don't understand is this. When I talk about the lack of good names, I actually think they've fucked up both aspects. Like Crumbz says there, what reason would you have to join the team aside from money, right? Well, that means, by the way, you're not going to get the top free agents, because what you're going to get instead is exactly who they get. You're going to get an average to middle table player who says, look, I'll join your team if you just pay me 1.5 times what my other offers are, and I'll just do it for money. Listen, if I have a choice between joining your team, Dignitas, or insert whatever other team, FlyQuest, I'm not winning on any of them, so do you give me the most money? Okay, I'll join your team. Which, by the way, a terrible reason to join a team. You want them to go, look, I really want to join your team, and the money makes sense. You want it to be the money to come second, The other part is this. If it's not money, then the main reason you want them to join is either the org has a commitment to winning, like you're saying, Crumbz, they've shown it in the past, because that way, even if the split I join, they don't have the killer roster, I can trust, they'll get it for next split, though, if I do well, they'll add in the pieces I need. Or, the other way is, I can join today because you've already got a really good player that I want to play with. And I think the latter one especially, listen, I think CLG fucked up the former, the whole thing, and they didn't set the mentality that we're here to win and, we're always going to re-up. But I also think they really fucked up not having a superstar player, because really the last really huge name they had was Doublelift. And the way they even kicked him out almost implied we're the fucking friends team, aren't we? It's not about winning or whatever, because we just won and we kicked the guy. He was basically the best player on our team. We kicked him. And then after that, I think where they fucked up is this. The biggest name they really had for most of the years was Afromu. He was one of them considered the best at his position. And even then, Afromu's sort of known, unfortunately, as someone the behind the scenes is most people know he sort of has splits it seems like he takes off or phones it in, as it were, he's not really necessarily known as a killer instinct guy who's driving himself. It's a bit cynical in that sense. So my problem is I don't feel like they did a very good job, because what you're saying there, Zaboutine, about if you're going to spend, you just sort of go all out, don't you? If you're going to, as much as I make fun of TSM, if you're going to spend, go for a massive fucking name, go for some enormous thing that could change the whole culture, make people want to join the team. That could be a game changer. What I think CLG's done is exactly the opposite. They've gone right in the middle. They haven't gotten the rookie who hasn't done it yet and paid him nothing. They haven't gotten the guy who's the superstar and you pay him because it's not worth the money, but you will win. They've gone right in the middle where you just slightly overpay for average talent. And as a result, guess what? If you slightly overpay for average talent, I'm not surprised that you have 1,000,000 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th place finishes. It's an uninspiring approach to making a team, I'm afraid. It's not really a sporting approach even. This almost reminds me of, do you remember in the pre-franchising days when people always used to say, a very cynical take, but they always used to be LCS teams just recruit people based on who has more Twitter followers or whatever. That almost looks like what CLG does, dude. What? That used to be a meme. That's almost real here. Do you have any final thoughts on the CLG one, or should we move on? Obviously,
I got one. It's the fact that you can really see this in the academy organizations that every team has, right? How seriously do you take the league is how well you do in academy at the same time. Who do you see at the top of academy? The same teams you see at the top in the LCS. They can switch the players back and forth. It's usually not that big of a problem. They sell these players off. Where is CLG Academy? Right, this team right now, dead last. Last year, dead last. The only time they had some semblance of talent in the management was when Moon was coaching academy, and the only thing he did that we were able to see, because nothing else, obviously we know what the coach is doing, is make that same hard engaged composition for CLG at the time, and then they're able to win a bunch of games. And so they play suddenly just out of nowhere, bloop, just a random blip in the radar. Oh, I think they got top 4, top 5 suddenly. But that was the coach that then when everybody else says, well, we got nobody else who has shown a proven track record of improving the situation that we're in. Let's put Moon back on the main staff. And now he does the same thing to LCS, gets a few wins, but just like in academy, teams figure it out. And now you're back to square one. And that's where CLG is at right now, because they have they just have nothing. They haven't focused on developing talent. And Moon is the last semblance of somebody that gave them something. But I don't think Moon by himself can carry this org. It just needs to be a change from way up above.
Right. The other angle I thought we could talk about is like, if you have any further thoughts, because obviously this transitioned into a more general topic about the franchising era, because one of the interesting things to me is I actually look at some of the other teams in the league and I always say, to me, it's actually really underwhelming that every year LCS is so stratified and you have sort of like the tier 1 teams that can win the league. Then you have the ones that maybe could upset one and come fourth. Then you have the ones that they make the playoffs, but they're not going to do anything. Then you have the group that just can't make playoffs and they're bad, right? You always have this stratification. But the reason that's so underwhelming is exactly because of the context that it's in franchising. Like, this is when, in theory, every team has money. It isn't like the beginning of LCS when you were playing Crumbz, and there actually were teams that like barely had a team house, and the salaries were like a tenth of everyone else. Like, it's not like that. So in theory, now it's like sports. It's like being in an NBA. Like, unless you're in the smallest market team ever, if your team just sucks, you probably did a bad job as a GM. Like, at the end of the day, there is the resources out there to succeed. So, what are your thoughts, Crumbz, in general on like the franchising era? Because a lot of the things obviously that we were promised, we didn't really get, like the talent development, everyone changing things and stuff. So what do you think?
I think the non-franchising were some of the most exciting games of all time. I mean, everyone remembers so many relegation matches. It's kind of the same theory behind playoffs. Right? You want to see the best compete. You want to see people that potentially you thought sucked all year. And it actually gives you incentive to watch the teams that suck. Because now you're like, yeah, you know what? I don't even want to see you again. I want to see you lose. I want to see you get out of here. I want to see you give a shot to somebody else. And that's exciting. Those games are really hype. So many players made their careers, and they even doubled some of his most famous games are actually from the relegation matches. That's what brought him back from his pseudo retirement. So I do think that franchising offers a lot, and you might even be true in saying that there are enough players with enough money to actually warrant some of these teams leaving. And if you have enough interest in actually making a strong league, how on earth you must really be shit if with all this money your bottom 10th team can't beat an org that has no investment to match what you're doing, right? It seems crazy. So at least having the option there would be exciting. And I do think though that what we had heard a while ago about rumors of Academy leaving and whatnot, I think teams are just scared. I think the LCS teams are actually just scared of the position that they're in. It's like, listen, somebody can show us up, right? CLG is in a very happy spot knowing that there is no relegation here, that their investment is safe, and so they can afford to phone it in a way. And I'm sure other teams can view that their investments don't need to be taken as seriously because of how safe they are. But the fact that an organization of just 5 players and 1 player coach beat all the academy teams, all the amateur teams, I guarantee you this team would have also beaten some of the bottom LCS teams. That's what scares them, right? Because that's just showing you that that they are offering no value, that the entire multi-million-dollar organization is offering nothing of benefit over just 5 players and a dude that coaches them.
That's we have this in Europe, we have this talk about open and closed leagues pretty much every week.
Of course.
Since it's culturally like really unacceptable for lower teams not to be relegated in traditional sports in Europe. So, for instance, we have this very, I would say, like classic case. We have Carmine Corp. So Carmine Corp is the best team in ERL, like in French in NFL. In Spring Split, they beat absolutely everyone. They demolished the European Cup, like the how do you call it? European Masters.
EU Masters, yeah.
Yeah, and they can't get into the LEC. And on the other hand, you have BDS, that's a very rich organization that can buy us the slot from Schalke. And this obviously had raised this topic multiple times in the last few weeks in Europe. And I think that at the end of the day, the franchise was a great idea at the moment. It has been decided, but for instance, I don't know how it would be in North America, because I don't know if there is a way to make it like profitable enough for players if they work and play in the second division. But you see that in Europe, you have an actually well-working ERL system where national leagues are having a very, very good, even like on par viewership with LEC. teams have money, players are getting paid, less paid than in LEC and in LCS, but they make a good living, and you want to see kind of a continuous thing from because we have a second division in France. So you have second division in France, then you have ERL, then you have Euromaster, and then you have LEC. And this thing just makes the thing, if there was up and downs at every single level, it would make the whole environment much more exciting. So on the sport aspects, I completely agree with Crumbz, which is organization should bring more, but we see that the process falls completely in comparison to 5 players that just want to work harder than anyone together. And it's sad to see, because the decision that has been made to protect investment and protect the players at the end kind of shows its limits to this day. But I still think that it's like a kind of a result based, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of players wouldn't be pro to this day if there was not franchise and stuff. Like, it has been protecting the player when it has been decided. But at the end of the day, I feel like the rules are not strict enough within franchise. Like, that's my point. It's like, I would say yes, it's better to have open, but open is too risky. But at the same time, like, completely closed is not that great. And when you see orgs such as, CLG and Golden Guardians, but even for Golden Guardians, I have a different aspect. Is like, how many of your players that you sold to other teams are like winning, or things like this. Like, how many players that have you developed that are still working within your org, right? And how many of your players are just retired or like in second division? That's completely different. So if you sell players and they're like playing in LCS, and you keep like getting players from the second division and putting them in the first division, and they keep playing and playing, then you're a development org, and you shouldn't be punished for that. But if you just keep hiring players and they just like disappear, or they just do nothing, and you can't even sell them to any team, and they just go in second and third division, then what's the point of your org? And then like there should be kind of more metrics on like how well you do for the rest of the league as an organization. And if you want to go on the lower bracket of the budget, there should be my guess, but at least do what you should be doing, which is develop new talent, and just not hire like veterans from another region. Yes. Merge them with some like average tier player. Try to salvage the year. Make kind of the one-on-one communication in LCS team, like we do better next time, and just iterate in the next split. I think that's pretty much where I stand in terms of league, is closed league, especially in NA. It's just, which is the whole thing about any org, get something to sell to the players you're going to hire, to the management you're hiring to manage them, and to the fans that are going to cater to these players, and try to push it to the maximum. And no matter what it is, just try to push one thing. Like for One on the Thieves, it's content. Team Liquid is excellence. TSM is like the old org. Cloud9 is kind of a family. Everybody try to have their own thing. And if GG wants to be a development and FlyQuest want to be like planting trees, it's fine. Just bring a story. Try to get players that cater to the story and try to push it to the fans. And if you do it in a decent way, you shouldn't be punished for being last, because they're gonna be losers in any league. But at least do something. At least do something that's just not like standing in the bottom and waiting for the market to rise to sell your spot at the end.
I think you bring up a really good point in judging teams by a metric of how well are their former players doing. Like, what are they all up to? Because by that metric, CLG's case looks even worse at this point.
Oh, most of their players aren't in the league. Like, think about it. The player they tried to develop, Crumbz, was Wiggly. He just fucking doesn't exist anymore. Then all the old veterans they have, half of them are just fucking gone, or in academy teams, or in even worse teams. Yeah, there's no... I actually think Zaboutine made a very shrewd point there. First of all, what he said at the end is absolutely a fact, which is there are only 10 spots. So even if we had the 10 best GMs in the world, one has to be 10th. Like, by definition, someone has to lose. You can't all be first. My problem is this. We're not talking about the idea that, like, you can't be the worst team. But as you say, there has to be, like, a reason. There has to be a rhyme or a reason. There has to be, like, a theme to it. Because as you say, Zaboutine, it'd be one thing if, as you say, the best examples would be, like, Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians obviously have tried to bill in PR. Like, we're doing it to develop talent. Their problem just is, you look at the players they have, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Like, they sort of developed some of the players maybe in the team they had last year that they sold. I don't know about that. Some of those were known players, but they get a couple. I'll give them credit for signing Closer, for example, sticking with He and FBI. I'll give them the credit for those nuns. But for example, if you want to be the team that develops players, then you have to bring me Blabber. You have to bring me Johnson. I need to see these players come from your org. Whereas instead, I think some of these teams, we all know some of them just say that when they want to save the money, like develop players become code for don't spend much this split. Meanwhile, if you're the other teams, yeah, if you're the top team, you're supposed to win. If you're a team that's in a playoff position, okay, now maybe you are the guy who signs like not the absolute best player, but he's still a player that's good. Like there should be like a theme behind what you're doing. Because a point that Zaboutine makes there that actually might go or misunderstood by fans is that once you make a closed system where it's a league like this, which by the way, just like American sports leagues, it contains a profit sharing element. It's a sport, it's a team sport among all of you at that point in time. Like effectively, even though TSM and Team Liquid battle each other to win LCS, they're also all part of the same show like WWE, in the same way Hulk Hogan and the fucking Macho Man might be having a match, but they are both in the WWF, and whoever wins, the WWF wins, doesn't it? Like it doesn't really matter in that sense. Like there is an element that I do think is whack about that, which is, it's kind of like what happened in LEC. People might remember quite an infamous comment by Ocelot Carlos from G2 about this, where he basically implied that he actually wants some teams kicked the fuck out of LEC because he thinks they're just parasites. Like those are the orgs that don't bring through new talent, that don't promote themselves a real, that don't have t-shirt sales and marketing. And so to him, they're just people sat around just taking their percentage of the rev share and not doing much on their end with it. So I don't blame him for being mad on that one. Like that's my problem. I don't mind you being last, but you can't be last when, like in this case for CLG, you didn't pay for last place rosters. You tried to be good. You didn't have a good GM apparently.
Steve was on an LCS show the other day, and he didn't even know who was on Golden Guardian. He's like, "Who are the players? I don't know what these teams are doing." So, I mean, I think it just goes to show that like the teams aren't even if the teams aren't even on the radars of the other teams, like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but on the other hand, and that's one thing I would say because I feel like the blame should come from the top management, like top.
Yes.
Like you buy something, you're the one buying the slots. You're the one like one of the thieves. They have a company that bought a slot, but they're a company with or without the slot, right? And like that's the best newcomer to the franchise era by a significant margin, for instance.
For sure.
And I think that's because they have a vision for their company and they try to apply this vision for that's kind of a nail in their shop, right? They have so many other things to offer and they try to treat every single ale in their shop with the same culture. You can't blame just the players, just the head coach, just the general manager, because obviously it has to come from, it's kind of like a waterfall where I'm going to buy this for like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 million, depending on the game. And I'm going to try to build that thing and I want to have this culture because just as an asset manager, I want to sell it or I want to keep it and I want to sell it at these price points, right? That's what you want to do. So even just from a just asset management perspective, you need to hire the people that are going to be able to develop your financial vision of what you're currently buying. And you could just come and hire people from the industry that know about the game. There is a lot of, like, I've seen a lot of people, and some of the people that have been working for CLG, I think they are great people, and they would work in maybe they would work very well in other orgs. It's like, oh, the vision is to do that. Okay, so do you want to do that? Yeah, I want to do that. So I want to be, I don't know, I want to be first in 7 years. I want to be last for 3 years, and then I want to win. I want never win, and I just want to maintain my spendings. I want to lower my spendings. Just this. But we're gonna like sell that to the fans, and we're gonna try to build a story with that. But this has to come from the top management. You can't just come and say, "Oh yeah, I don't know." Like, I'm not gonna blame like any coach that happened to be in CLG or the general managers. Obviously, they made mistakes, but I think that
is, even though actually LCS has had, you know, they had like Tyler Watt on an episode and stuff, in general LCS doesn't go as much for sort of like the special guest angle. It's more the same group of people and talent rotated, and then maybe occasionally they have a pro player, or like I said in that case it was like a one-off that they had Tyler Watt on. But LEC actually has shown basically for the last 2 years a commitment to bringing in different people you've never seen on LEC before. So obvious examples would be people from other games, like from CSGO they had Frankie and Machine and some of these people. They've had now a bunch of people who were like casters from other regions. If people remember back in the day, Pappy Smithy came on. LS was on for an episode. They've even had Ashley fucking like Skype/Zoom in to do interviews on. So they've obviously shown this commitment, right, to like trying to essentially add like variety, have a bit of spice on the broadcast, make it different week to week. But where they've actually, the first time I've ever seen them seemingly put a foot wrong is one of the people they announced this week would be on the LEC and would even be casting a game was this guy called thebausffs, who, if people don't know, he's a streamer. And the reason it's a little bit of a controversial topic, as far as I can tell, is based on what you've seen from the guy on Reddit. Because I didn't know much about him because I don't follow streams much, Crumbz. So I myself had only really ever seen this guy mentioned in like those famous threads where, like, for example, he got banned by Reddit because it looked like he was like feeding on a game. I think it was like 0 and 10 or something, you know. And then obviously, as far as I've been told, he's a streamer where it's just an entertainment stream. He's not there to try and be the best and win on the most meta thing. He's like to play whatever he wants, you know, but he's a challenger player. So the problem, as far as I can tell, is a couple of pro players in the league, like I saw Upset and Promiscue essentially implied this. They sort of like were a bit, they took this as an affront because their take was sort of like, this guy just ints on stream, and first of all, like, Upset's take was almost like, what, and now Riot, like, fucking co-signs that and brings you on the broadcast. And then Promiscue's angle was more like, imagine being an up-and-coming caster, and then you're sat at home like, God, I wish I could cast LEC, and then you just see a fucking streamer on. Like, I mean, the analogy would be, imagine if you were like the next best great caster in America, and you were like, I wish I could be LCS, and it was like, casting the next game is Shin and Tyler 1. You'd be like, what am I even wasting my time for? So, like, those two takes are interesting, because I don't know enough what the bout's got to know, if any of them accurate, but I saw there was some pushback. So, like, Zaboutine, do you actually know much about this guy, the Bouts? Can you give me any insight?
I mean, I'm not a huge.
I've got some insight. I've got some insight on him that I think is what made him a choice for this week, or for just the LEC in general, was MSI. Because when MSI rolled around, he was one of these streamers who, as an entertaining streamer, people love to watch the solo queue matches that happen between all the pros in the world coming into the US and trying to play there. And so he was actually playing against some of these best players and was making a lot of noise for players that are like, hey, look, he's beating up on these pros. Like, Showmaker can't handle him, right? These kinds of things were making waves. And so it was interesting for the audience to see, hey, look, like, our streamers are having a good time against these pro players. So I think that was the initial interest for the LEC. Is like, hey, an international tournament is being recognized, or a streamer is being recognized for his ability during an international competition. And so I think from that, they thought, hey, maybe we could do something with the bows. I see like Kadrill mentioned him a bunch, LEC caster. So I think that was the initial idea behind having him on. And I mean, on the point of LCS doing it, I feel like, I mean, we have had Tyler 1 and Yasuo on the show, not as a caster before, but I do think that a big part of it is that these NA streamers are much more expensive. If there was anyone that actually was good at casting, and I'm not sure if the boss is good as casting, I'm not hearing his game today, but if he's good, then it really won't matter. But you probably don't have to pay him nearly as much as you'd have to pay the LCS streamers. Like, the LCS streamers that you have to bring onto the studio and actually pay are going to be so much more costly than the ones that you're going to find for the LEC. So if it's an interest in diversifying or just adding more to the roster, LEC, I feel like they're getting a pretty decent deal from this. It's not going to be like Tyler 1. Like, that's going to cost you so much, and they usually only do it for finals.
What do you think, Zaboutine? Obviously, you can go any angle you want on this, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, just culturally, I think Americans, when you watch traditional sports, like, they really like to see the same faces, which is very weird for Europeans that like have a bunch of guests in any kind of set, like sports set. I think LEC has done a very, very interesting job at like trying to diversify their approach depending on the day. Like, they want to talk about something, and they just try to bring kind of a group of people on the desk that's just gonna kind of be able to bring the whole idea alive and work around it. Whereas I think that's and they don't really care like who's gonna be. Like, sometimes it's just a player, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's gonna be, and like, we had segments, I remember in LCS, I did it once, I think, where I was on the desk, but it was like, I would have loved to do it like once every other week, and a lot of players would actually love to do it. It's just, I think, just a cultural thing of like just bringing pieces and trying to get like some fresh air here and there. It's the same thing in terms of segments, where I feel like LEC has much more diverse, I would say much more frequent segments where like NA really love this desk. You know, they like the desk, they like the being there with like the face of like the analysis and the face of the hosting and just talk together. So I feel like in that sense, LEC is always going to have an edge, at least to my humble perspective, because I feel like it's much more fresh. from what Crumbz said, I think you don't need to bring people that has a massive audience. Like you don't need to bring Pokemon or Ninja on the analysis desk to get something exciting. And like for instance, the case of Alorim, that's like was very good when he was a player, and even like switched to the desk after. And people such as Emily, like Emily was great. Like she just didn't start being great like last year. Like she has been great for many years as a journalist, and she has great ideas about the game. It's just a matter of trying to bring different people, and in that sense, I feel like LCS is so conservative for a reason I kind of miss, because you can't tell me like, oh, I'm gonna bring, I don't know, you're gonna bring Meteos to the desk, like it's gonna cost you as much as like the BAUS or LS for LEC. I don't think like Meteos is gonna cost you as much, and I feel like it would bring like an insane value to the broadcast. So in that sense, I feel like sometimes gonna backfire, because I mean the buffs can be an inter and players hate the inters, but I feel like it's so much more valuable for your show on the long term to try these things than being conservative and try to get only people that everybody's gonna like, because these players are big streamers and big streamers are extremely expensive. So you just never do anything. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's my take on it.
I mean, one of the issues I have is like you sort of backed into the take actually that I have, which goes like when people use the example like Promiscu did there of like, you know, imagine if you're like an up and coming caster, it's like, bro, that applies like if they had you on the show, like because you played support in LEC, you get to be on the analyst desk instead of like a true analyst. Like, wouldn't that apply to you, mate? But the problem is pro players will never take that into account. They all think that they know more than everyone fucking else for something. A lot of them do at least. So I will say there's already that sort of like elephant in the room if you're a pro player, in my opinion. Like I've seen some people on the LCS desk, Crumbz, that were like, get this guy the fuck off. Like he wasn't even good at the game, never mind talking about it. But I won't name names there. But I'll say this. The problem is, as I said, I don't know from what the BAUS, like I don't follow streaming, unfortunately. So the problem is, I can only go off like the threads I've seen. Like if, based on the threads I've seen, it's someone who's more like in the vein of just an entertainer and he's, you know, like he doesn't care if he feeds or whatever. Like, yeah, if that's true and he's done on the LEC, that seems a bit cynical. Like they're just doing it for like the, wow, look at this guest star on wrestling. Like that sounds a bit like you're doing it just for like the pop of a bit of variety, right? But if it actually turns out the guy, like as Zaboutine says, for all I know, the fact that he's been a US challenger a billion times and apparently like if he can essentially be good enough to get into challenger over and over again in a competitive ladder and then chooses to he probably is good at the game. So maybe he's going to bring a different perspective I don't know about. Maybe he has super good insight. Like if people don't know, spoiler if you watch any of my shows, I obviously like the idea of giving people who haven't had a chance a break and seeing if they're any good. And I'll throw in there as well, it's just a one-off appearance. Like, it would be different if he was like the new caster and you were like a fucking up-and-coming caster. You're like, what the hell? He got the gig? If he's only doing like one day or something, I don't think that's a big a deal, you know? Like, as I say, some of the other people that have come on the show didn't even come from fucking League of Legends, so shouldn't the same thing apply to them? Like, so I think this one's a little bit of what we in England call like a storm in a teacup. It's not really that big a deal, is it? Like, it's fairly minor. Like, of all the things people are getting mad at this week, was there just nothing left and they had to just pick this one? Because I don't see that much drama in this one myself.
It's because the CLG rage just didn't get fully satisfied. Like,
yes.
it wasn't fully resolved, so we needed to find something else to be upset about.
It feels like it.
Random streamer says join the LEC. I get mad.
Yeah, I don't think it was that big a deal.
Nobody's gonna remember like him going anyway. Like it's one day of LEC.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and I hope they will reinvite him at some point. Like because people changed. Title One's banned, and it was like, you know, like not accepted anywhere. No, like Riot uses him like as much as they can.
Yes.
I just feel like it's like I don't want promotion of toxicity, but if Title One that is known to be borderline toxic most of the time can get that much praise on like the show, like I mean, why not trying with other players that have their own personality? Nobody. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up with like a bunch of very like smooth people with no personality, and people are going to complain. People will complain regardless, you know?
Yeah, of course. I'll also say as well, this is actually, funny enough, it's actually similar to one of the problems with the discussion we just had about the franchising aspect, which is that you've got the intersection between the entertainment and business world and pure competition. And as Zaboutine pointed out, like, I'm sorry, if you make a closed system, by definition, you can never have the most competitive system, because what if there's a team of 5 players, as you were talking about in the Academy example, what if there's 5 players and a coach who actually could beat you right now, tomorrow, and you wouldn't need to, you know, like debate, should this team be removed? They just beat you in the match and they're in the league has happened in LEC and EULCS a lot of times if people don't know. Like, we were famously the league where there was plenty of turnover at the bottom. It wasn't like LCS where they would just sort of like hang on with the veterans and there wasn't enough talent. So to me, that's the part that people are missing on this equation, right? Is right now, one of the reasons why a lot of these teams and orgs do veer more into the entertainment side than the raw like competition is because the competition doesn't make you any money at the moment, unfortunately. Whereas like raw views, like if you're the LEC, listen, if you were me, yeah, maybe I would make the LEC be the most hardcore fucking broadcast ever with all the super nerds, but I might not have the same viewership. I might have way less viewership. The sponsors might not be interested. Maybe in this case, maybe it's too hardcore. Like the obvious example would be this, Crumbz. Like we would all agree on this show, Emily does a great job on the LCS, but I tell you what, I guarantee Tyler 1 brought more fucking views individually the week he was on. Like if that's why you have to start weighing up like some fucked up cynical media Anubis, like which is better, more views or more knowledge on the like unfortunately, as long as we're in a business where we haven't figured out the monetization of esports, we're going to face this over and over and over again. Like what? Like I'll give you a quick example. In CSGO, believe it or not, right now we're actually in deep shit viewership-wise for the weirdest reason ever, Crumbz, which is that the best team in the world in CSGO, don't get triggered, it's not 10 years ago, mate, is called Gambit. Believe it or not, it's actually a Russian team called Gambit. I'm not even making that up. But the problem is, mate, they haven't had a good team in years and years, right? So since their players are basically no-namers, like they've only just become famous like at the end of last year. Even though they're number one and they win almost every tournament, it tanks the viewership because the more popular teams don't make the final. So as fucked as it sounds, there's an example for you right there that actually pure competition can sometimes not go hand in hand with what would sell the most numbers. Like the joke in CSGO goes like this. If you really wanted the biggest numbers ever in the world, you would get Na'Vi, who is a really good team from the CIS region, but they just have loads of fans because it's like everyone in CIS region, like Russia, Ukraine, they all support this team. You'd have them play against MIBR, which is a Brazilian team. But the joke is this, the Brazilian team's terrible, Crumbz. They're not even like top 20. It's just that they have all the Brazilian fans and this other one would have all the CIS fans. So right now in esports, we have this problem. Like if you want the viewership to be super high, we might not be able to have all the wonderful, bells and whistles of hard competition we want, just the way it is, unfortunately.
I think what's really interesting about that is I'm seeing a parallel with boxing and how boxing matches are so much about just the entertainment aspect. And I mean, the good thing about, say, like just comparing the show matches that you would have from League to show matches of boxing, in League, there isn't actually just any satisfaction beyond the skill. Right? You actually you have to see good teams play or else it doesn't feel very satisfying. And if it's trash teams versus a really good team and it's just a stomp, that's even worse. Maybe you have some fiesta, but even that doesn't really feel that good. So it's a tough balance to find between creating a show match that has the right attraction for viewers and still delivering something that is exciting. Because in boxing, you might have the two worst boxers possible, but someone's getting punched in the face and people like watching that. True. People don't like someone running it down because they can just do that themselves. Right? There's no satisfaction in watching bad teams play. So I think that it's something that Fortnite tried, having a lot of casters being their streamers as well. But eventually the thing that always ends up backfiring is just that it costs too much. Right? I think that teams and the leagues would always do it, but for the streamers, it's not worth it. And for the orgs, it's just not worth it because it costs too much. So they'll try it. They'll save some budget for these big names here and there, but it'll never take over just because it's not monetarily wise.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Crumbz, on that. But it's just, I feel like there is still, regardless, in League, you can have like small investment with big outcome in terms of like talent on air, especially from the player base and the small streamers. A lot of people want to get a shot at like proving they have something interesting to say or refreshing way of saying it. I think like being conservative doesn't really help. But overall, I'd say that if you want to go that route, eventually you're gonna face a wall of like, I have to pay so much more for my broadcast than having dedicated people that do their job on a weekly basis, especially on a weekly show.
By the way, I love the analogy for the boxing one, Crumbz, because you're right. That right now that is such a topical pick as well. But I've seen exactly the same conversations happened, which is all these people, Crumbz, go, oh, this is a disgrace. This fight shouldn't even be. I'm obviously talking about like the fucking Logan Paul. I think it was Logan Paul, right? Logan Paul versus Mayweather one, right? Everyone was like, this is a disgrace to the history of boxing. Like, wow, wow, what a sad world we live in. The same people, by the way, talked like that all the way in the lead up to the fight. Followed the whole drama about the fight, watched the fight, then afterwards still said, like, this should never even have happened. Like, this is a disgrace. Like, you made all that happen. Literally you. You're the one who let your eyeballs, your money, your attention, your constant talking is the reason why that fight was way bigger than whatever title fight will take place this year in boxing between, like, the real best fighters. Like, you guys did that. So, because I noticed Reddit loves to do that as well. On the one hand, they love to, like, decry drama, but they love drama more than anything. They love drama more than the game itself. Like, as the CLG thing pointed out, people don't know. That CLG topic was the number one fucking thread, like on the whole subreddit.
Like
even though,
threads.
Yeah, even though in general, like, listen, it was like drama, but it was like a fairly mild thing, you know. It wasn't like the end of the world. Like you'd have thought that was like CLG had won the LCS the way that thread was treated. It was all the attention went to it. Because I also think in general that's an example of how it's the same thing happening in boxing. If people don't know, the business model no longer makes sense versus what the entertainment model is. The entertainment model for real is that because I'll give people a little bit of nuance. I know a little bit about boxing. I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but I can talk to this. Basically, the problem is this: Floyd Mayweather is an enormous figure who is very good at branding, but he's actually very rare in boxing and combat sports. Most of the other ones, who by the way are amazing fighters, they're just really good at fighting, but they're not as good at selling themselves. So what Floyd Mayweather cleverly did, if remember he did it with Conor McGregor before fucking Logan Paul, is what he saw was this: look, if I fight, especially because I'm a guy with an undefeated record, I only want to fight if it's an enormous money fight, because what am I putting on the line? I'm putting my whole legacy on the line. So if I do this fight, it's not just that you have to be as good at boxing as me, because actually I'm losing something up by giving you a chance to beat me. You have to be as good at promoting as me. You have to bring something to, as they say, your side of the table. So the point that Floyd Mayweather cynically but correctly identified was he can make way more money fighting Conor McGregor, who has an enormous mouth and is really good at media as well, and Logan Paul, who has all this YouTube fame and sort of Zoomer fame, than he can fight whoever the second. Like obviously, by the way, on paper you'd want to see him fight like Canelo again or something, wouldn't you? Like some super sick boxer. But the point is that probably wouldn't make as much money. And by the way, all these fucking people complaining, you wouldn't be talking about that fight. You would be after you don't even watch boxing. So the reason I do this little rant is you're going to see way more of this in esports, because in esports we've got even worse monetization. So if anything, Crumbz is right. All that saved us is the fact that these streamers make way too much money streaming. If they were making like half of what they make or a tenth of what they make streaming, dude, we'd probably have loads of broadcasts filled with these guys. Like the whole show would probably be fucking LS and Dominoes. Like that's all that would be on the real broadcast, and bring so many views, don't they?
You know, I think another thing for the boxing aspect is that the legit fighters like Muhammad Ali were also doing prize fights. Right? Everybody was always doing prize fights. So there was never a time where you weren't competing for show matches and money.
Yeah, if people don't know, that's actually a really misunderstood detail. Muhammad Ali, you can go look this up. He fought in like a weird, fucked up pseudo MMA fight at one point in time where he didn't even understand the rules. Like the guy was like beating his ass. Like people don't get it. Like if you go back, like didn't they have? I think they might have even had a fight where it was like fucking like, you know, like fucking Muhammad Ali versus Bruce Lee or something ridiculous, like some stupid one like that. Like, which by the way, it sounds.
Is that right? That sounds sick.
It does, but it wasn't. Like, because again, if these people don't fight the same sport as anyone in MMA knows, one person just dominates the other one, and the other one just looks embarrassing, you know. Like, yeah, you're right. There were always fights like that. Yeah, of course. And by the way, here's a real spoiler. I'll just give everyone the ultimate black pill for combat sports. I can't believe people in 2021 are talking like combat sports of all sports have integrity. Combat sports have always been about making the money fight over the real fight. Like, if you've ever followed the UFC, there's been a million guys who should have had the title fight, but then they gave it to like Conor McGregor, etc., when he didn't deserve it. Because again, the difference is he'll bring 10 times more revenue, so you just make that fight. And that's why the reason why I even like the analogy is, right now, esports is closer to WWE and UFC than it is to like football, in my opinion. The difference in things like football, and the reason why I say football, like European soccer, is there's elements of European soccer that make no sense in the modern media world. Like the idea you have a 45-minute half with 0 breaks and timeouts, Zaboutine, that's alien. Like Americans would never allow that if we invented soccer tomorrow. Like, there would be a break every 10 minutes and, like the sponsor, everyone knows this, but the point is, soccer is a sport that is so huge in terms of views. They have the opposite. They go, listen, we're willing to actually throw aside all this media shit because it's just guaranteed people will watch the game. Esports is the opposite. It's way, way, way far from being in that position. So unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of like compromises. That's why this one isn't that big a deal. This is just a fucking guy appearing on the broadcast. I'd be more worried about a world in the future where like something like this might actually be a straight up caster if they're popular enough and wanted to do it. That's the more sinister one if you want to complain about something,
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's much more. It's entertainment prevails in at least on the because the monetization of anything on the internet is lower. Yes. Entertainment is always going to prevail on sports.
Yeah, of
and
course.
You have to make both coexist because the problem is entertainment needs esports as well to exist. Like you need something that's more valuable and more long term than just like a bunch of streamers, and that's the kind of the structure that esports is bringing to the streaming industry. But on the other hand, like streaming, like esports is so small and doesn't bring money, whereas like streaming just brings a
at the end of the day, it's entertainment, right? The viewers are watching. If you polled them, why are you watching esports? Entertainment, right? Like that is what they came there to get.
Yes.
So to cater to that direction isn't wrong. It's just finding a way to have a suitable league that isn't as just staged up as some sort of play, but at the same time having a sense of okay, there could be some changes, there could be something exciting that's happening 24/7 around this league, so it keeps me involved. So because if it is entirely staged, you won't have that same level of I know what's going to happen, I don't feel that invested in it. But if you constantly are left in the dark, not knowing who's going to lose, who's going to win, what new drama is going to come out, you're constantly getting engaged by it, you're going to be much more entertained in the long run.
I even think, by the way, this is a bit of like a side tangent, but I'll be very quick with it. Basically, I also think that's one of the reasons why back in the day, even when Korea was like far and away the best region in the world, listen, I understand, obviously like the time of when it's on and the broadcasts are secondary piggyback broad. Listen, it was never going to have as many viewers as LCS with English language viewers, but I also personally thought back in the day, one of the reasons it was like so low in comparison to what you'd think it would be is because, let's be real, LCK back in the day was actually like, unless you were a total nerd, it's quite a boring style of play. They weren't having all clown fiesta 5v5 team fights around Baron all day long. Like, if you're a really noob fan who just plays League and watches like the odd esports game, it's way easier to watch LCS even now and back in the day than it was to watch some like super extreme 70-minute macro game between Jin Air Green Wings who never engage with a fucking pick comp versus some team who have like the ultimate team fight comp and then they like just rotate on every. I'm the little kid at the fucking zoo sticking my tongue out at the tiger, and then if the tiger runs over, rips my head off. You all laugh, don't you? Well, maybe not in that case. That's maybe some old school humour on that one. I grew up with Faces of Death, Crumbz. What can I tell you? Like, I'm not really in touch with the modern generation. What do you think of that, though? Because I've always found that really weird. Because, like, I can talk. By the way, I'll say this at the front. I totally understand not liking me. Like, I'm a pretty obnoxious individual. I'm very much like fucking. I'm one of those Marmite guys, aren't I? You either love it or you fucking hate it. I get that part. But like the one part I don't get is why people are confused that I'm like one of the few people who has this type of content. Because there are real options. Just the option is if you want people who are sort of more polite and they're more buttoned up. That you already have that. That's all the broadcasts. That's like the LCS broadcast. That's Travis's content. That's there's a lot of that shit out there. What I'm puzzled by is why people think like you can have one. You can sort of like put different inputs in, but get different outputs.
I mean, that's just a problem that goes way beyond esports, right? But I think in your case, you do have a polarizing persona that people just can't seem to separate or even like accept that one precedes the other. Like you're just not gonna get the content without what you're doing. So I think that people want their cake. They want to eat it too. And I mean, I like it. And honestly, when in 2016, before I left to Korea, I was even looking to your videos as some sort of inspiration. I just had the same little overlay, doing little rants there with the title. So I mean, I'm thinking doing that again and seeing if we could just satisfy people's cravings this way, because clearly they want it. They want it. So
what the fuck? Zaboutine, I didn't expect that reply. Like, it sounds like his reply there was like, look, I like your stuff, but actually, I'll make the content that people can watch and study your story. Like, that sounded like what you said there.
I could never fulfill. I can never fill that niche. You have the ability to never, like, you don't have to answer to anybody, right? That is what allows you to do whatever the fuck you want. So I think that is what people probably aren't even used to, somebody that lives that way. Right, just
I will say it, but
answer to anybody, that you can say whatever, you can make the darkest jokes, have the craziest shit you want, and still nothing will happen to your employment the next day. Most people aren't in that position. Most people don't see people in that position, so it's hard for them to even grasp how to not only behave that way, but how to deal with somebody that can act in that manner, because it feels like it goes against everything they know.
True.
I think one thing you do very well, like, I've tried to be in French that way in the past. It backfires quite a lot. So you need to take praise for doing that for like an extended period of time. But I think you're very good at generating frustration and will of answering you. Like people that will read your tweets and the way you phrase things like publicly, because most of the people don't even like watch your shows. They just read your tweets.
True.
And you have a very, very good phrasing at triggering people.
Oh, I'm annoying as fuck, aren't I? Yeah.
They want to run at you and shout the hardest they can, like you're wrong, and shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And this is very, very good for one reason, is this generates debates on a consistent basis. So you just create an atmosphere where people come, like when I come to your show, I come to an arena, right? Usually the other guest is my friend. Like, we're trying to fight, we're just getting into the arena and try to debate, but you know that they're gonna be harsh topics, they're gonna be hot takes, they're gonna be extreme. Like, you're gonna transform the reality into a very like black and white situation where you're gonna try to take the worst part, or like always the worst side of the stick, and just give the other ones to the fans, like try to argue with me. And I think it's very hard for people to understand that these creates very good and very interesting talks. But on the other hand, they have to accept the downside, which is, yes, your Twitter generates a little bit of frustration here and there. Yes, even me, sometimes I hear you, I read your takes, and I'm like, man, I think Thorin is like pretty far from the truth, but it's very good because I really want to argue with him right now. And
put it this way,
it's the Mayweather approach, right? It's like people don't know that, as like, you just need to generate interest, and if people are engaging with it, you don't actually care if they want to just talk shit all the time, because you're getting what you want. You're walking all the way to the bank laughing. So as like I think that's what people are missing, is that in the same way that they can complain about the way Mayweather fights and all these mock boxing battles and say these shit should have never happened, but at the same time buy the pay-per-view, fucking watch every single piece of content just to shit on it. It's the same thing that one takes advantage of in League. It's like, hey, you want to talk shit all the time, but you want to talk shit so much that you're signed up to my Patreon in order to get first access to what I am saying, in order to shit talk it sooner than anybody else. You got to, hats off to that, because the blindness that these people have is just something at next level.
Oh, but don't worry, Zaboutine. In line with what you were saying, one of my absolute favourites of those like little YouTube idents I have, like obviously I have one with Crumbz, where like the beginning of the video, like, what are you doing? It's just Orange channel. When I have those with like famous people, one of my favourites is the one that Perks made, because what people don't know is I almost never tell people what to say in those. I just tell them like, look, make a funny one, and if you can, like, you can burn me or burn yourself or whatever. Like, the only time, occasionally, if someone was like, I really can't think of anything, I like recommended a theme, but like obviously Perks came up with that himself. His one was, he basically just said like, sometimes I do think he's talking like, complete bullshit, but I also think sometimes it's funny or interesting. He phrased it the best way possible. Yeah, so obviously there's all the options out there, but actually I would make this, by the way, I was talking from my perspective, but you can make this a topic that's way bigger than me, because I actually think this is a trend in League of Legends, specifically a lot more than my home game of CSGO, because since in CSGO, the developer of the game, Valve, doesn't really have like direct input. Like, they don't actually even tell tournaments like, you can hire this person or don't hire the person. Basically, unless you do something like borderline criminal, like actually cheat in the game, Valve just leaves everyone to do whatever they're going to do. So, except for that one weird case where like fucking Gabe Newell just fired too good that like major years ago. Aside from that one weird one, which I've even heard from Valve employees, like apparently like even they didn't know that was happening. That really was how it was. One day they themselves woke up and just saw on Reddit like, oh, apparently Gabe Newell's was fired too good. So anyway, aside from that though, I feel like in League of Legends as a game, I get the same trend, and it's about all the names I listed before. People say the same thing about LS, like, oh, I like his content, I like the discussions, but like, oh, he's too abrasive. What they basically imply is there's a way to like, as you say, Crumbz, have your cake and eat it. Like have things exactly how you want it, but then have nothing irritate you about it. And I actually think in League in general, I don't think people get this. One of the reasons I love the content of Dom and LS and Monty and fucking all these names is because they give me something I don't get on a Riot broadcast. Like, in fact, with the choices Riot makes in terms of how they want to present themselves as incredibly professional sheen and don't offend people and sort of be a bit safe with people's feelings, that almost, I always say, it almost necessitates having an alternative, because there's always going to be fans. I mean, listen, especially a lot of like gamers 10 years ago were way edgier than they were now. There's always going to be a type of gamer that wants like a bit darker humor or something. And as you say, Crumbz, like, certain people, some of the other ones less so, but in my particular case, that ain't a coincidence, by the way, mate. I've purposely navigated my career the last sort of like 6-7 years to be that there can't be the one guy who goes, yeah, I didn't like that joke, you fired. Like, I've gone out my way not to let that happen. Most people in the industry, it makes perfect sense. You can't do that. Like, even to some degree, I know people won't get this, but even people like LS and Dom can't actually say everything they want. I mean, there's obvious examples, like Dom has his connection with Cloud9, LS has a connection with T1. Certain things will always be off the table. But as a result, unfortunately, if you like the traditional broadcasts, there will always be an alternative broadcast that can say those things. They always will go hand in hand.
You have to have that hand in hand, and that polarization is something I've even benefited from. I don't think I would have actually been in the position I was in if I didn't get the smarts and dumbs constant every single time that I was on any stream or pretty much any piece of content. Right. Just because people, if they like it, they have something to do. If they don't like it, they've got something to do as well. So you actually get to have both. It's the only way to actually interact with everyone. You can't satisfy everyone, but you can get interaction from everyone if you actually have something that they can like and something that they can dislike at the same time. So it actually is the largest net that you can cast for an audience. So I think that those are the figures that end up having the most influence, just the ones that are the most polarizing.
And I think on top of that, there's kind of the modern trend of trying to erase not erase, but minimize anything that's not the mainstream. Like, people really behave by streams of social media activity topics. Like, there's kind of a very set way of doing things, and people kind of basically hate anything that's different until they like it. So, sure. I mean, I feel like it's very like natural for people within the industry to question the way information should be transferred and try to bring their own way of doing so. And I think that especially because League is a very soft game and Riot has this player-first culture that's very good for what they're doing, it has softened a lot the whole environment and the way people talk about like the game in general. So I think it's very positive as a whole that some people dare, I would say, to bring some contrast into it. And obviously, because people are, especially from the League industry, are not used to it, they're gonna just hate it by nature because it's just different. But if you were asking, like, if your shows are too controversial to Gears of War specialist, it would say that it's pretty tame, to be honest.
True. Yeah. True.
So it really depends on the game. Just League is probably the softest esports out there. So.
What's happening in Gears? What's happening in Gears?
Basically, it's like COD on steroids. They're just all pros and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So they'd all be just flaming all the time, I'm sure is what you mean. I get the reference. Like, I have a question, though, then. I'll make this like a last topic on this one before we move on and start going to the end of the show. Right, what about this? Zaboutine, when you said earlier that you actually, on the French broadcast, sort of like, as you implied, you maybe flamed people or gave like harsh criticism or something. But as you said, like, you can only sort of do it in like spells, because eventually it just sucks having a million people tell you to kill yourself or that you fucking suck or whatever. Everyone knows that, right? Obviously, both of you have been people who've been on broadcasts, have been criticised. How do you actually how do you find that experience? How do you handle it? Because there's the things, Zaboutine. I'll give you a quick example. Back in the day, I've had a bunch of people where they've told me, like, I thought people exaggerated what your Twitter was like, but when you retweeted my tweet about this particular controversial topic, and I got all the replies, and on Twitter you can see if it says like @Thorin is what it means, the person that came from my retweet. They were like, when I see all the replies, I'm like, shit, is that what it's like to be you for a day? Because like, like if I've retweeted some edgy topic, obviously they get all the fucking haters that would come on my tweets, right? There's a part that people don't understand, I've noticed, is they think, because obviously if you're getting to be the one who critiques someone, you're the big bad guy, getting to be mean and stuff. A lot of people don't realise it is a mental strain, the backlash that comes, right? It isn't just like, you don't just go to sleep and go, oh, well, whatever, I just made my comments so I can sleep safely. Like, what was it been like for you, Zaboutine? It doesn't seem like it's your wheelhouse, mate, so it must have been harsh.
I mean, for me, it has never been a problem. I grew up having controversial takes on pretty much everything, and I always enjoyed critiquing debate and stuff. I'm not. It's just when I switched to being a coach, you can't be like, because you have to kind of keep this proximity with the player base and all the stuff. And I wanted to shift my personality around, like being like closer to the reality, which is always less exciting than the controversial take. So I've just decided to focus more on like trying to say the truth the way I see it in the most complex version, instead of going with like cliches and memes that trigger the audience and generate this kind of anger but enthusiasm about what I was saying all the time. So I'm just working with less hot takes nowadays. But back in the day, I never cared, because for me it was fueling me to do even more. I was like, oh, I have so many people that hate me and like DM me telling me like I'm so wrong and stuff like that. Tomorrow I'm gonna get even hotter take to make sure like they didn't have like they're gonna get like the because this is the thing is like they tune in to watch the game and then they just go into the DM, and then I'm like, wait for tomorrow, they're gonna be even more. Like, for instance, I was shit talking Fnatic, and the guy's gonna like, never shit talk Fnatic. I'm like, tomorrow I'm casting the game, man. I'm making sure I'm casting the game. Just please tune in. And then these people just hate you, but that's just funny. I feel like it's very funny to live that way until it becomes like, for you, it probably have like crossed the line of like death threats and stuff like this, and then it's just not fun anymore. And that's why I respect you for that.
What do you think, Crumbz? Here's the thing: you always give off the perception, I'll say, like you don't give a fuck. Like, you seem like you're super chill, but does it get to you ever? Because I will say, I used to be the same way. Like, let's say like 5 years ago. Like, I used to be really good at trolling people and not giving a fuck what they said. But then again, as Zaboutine says, it depends on what like level of danger we're at in here. Once it got to that people like legitimately on some level might try to murder me over what they think my politics are, stop being a bit funny. Then, it wasn't like I couldn't really roll with those punches as much. So how do you handle it, Crumbz? You seem like you don't get affected by it. Is that true?
Well, sorry, I couldn't hear that last bit.
Do you actually not get affected by, like, if you make a comment, for example, and people don't like your comment, or you criticize a team too harsh, can you handle the backlash or the response that you get from people?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something, the only times that it ever gets to me is if a fan happens to land upon something that they are very perceptive upon that I currently had worked on. And so if that happens, then I feel like, okay, like this actually was something that I already was thinking about and that it was actually mentioned. And so those are moments that just make me think, okay, you know what? Like, I already had addressed this, but the fact that somebody sees it's like for something to say in my cast, if I struggled with that and they were able to pick up on that same area that I thought I needed to work on, then that doesn't necessarily get to me in that, oh, they affected me. It's like, oh, I really needed to have actually worked on that before even casting. And so those are moments that get to me. But for the most part, I don't give a shit, because what I always think of is, who are the people saying this? I always just back, who is actually saying this? Who are the people that are addressing me in this? And they're like, okay, I'm the expert, not them. So I don't give a shit. And then on top of that, I'm like, okay, who's the kind of person that has the energy to go and use their time of the day, their precious daily moments, to type on internet to somebody that they don't know that they thought that they ruined their experience of watching an online video game? Like, okay, that's another person that just scratch off the list of people that are actually going to affect me. So I don't get shit talked by people that I actually respect, that have opinions that I hold valuable. So that has yet to happen. And if that were the case, I don't think I'd be negatively affected. It would be something to reflect upon more. So the biggest thing is just reminding, like, hey, I'm in this position because I have the expertise. I get to decide on things. If they're very perceptive on something that I already suspected, sure, that's fine. But just shit talk for the most part, it's just funny. It's just funny to see people get really mad. There was a long time ago where I made a video saying something like the European meta is behind. This is some video saying that EU is shit. And then for years, it just has never let up. It was like, this guy, it's terrible. How could he say this? Like, all of Europe just got so pissed off at this. And if anything, that shit's just funny to me. I laugh about that so much when I know how silly it comes from. I remember just on the girlfriends ruining LCS video, when that shit came out, I'm just laughing all day. I'm just spending the whole day laughing. I kid you not, from start to finish, it's just hilarious to me to see the reactions of all sorts, whether it's upset or enjoyment, it doesn't matter. It's just very funny. So I just figure, why not just laugh about it? Because it doesn't seem like it hurts anybody.
By the way, that's an example right there, Zaboutine, of a Thorin style phrasing. Because if you don't know, the video he's referring to, where the title was Girlfriends Are Ruining the LCS. Here's the thing. Technically, his title wasn't incorrect, but he meant in the context of, like, you know, the way all the guys are behaving and all the stupid shit they do. But obviously, you see the title, and you can imagine every sort of person is going to react super emotionally strong to that title. Like, whether they agree, disagree, whether they're a woman or a man. Like, everyone, like that. Crumbz did a good job on that one. I'll give him like 8 Thorins out of 10 on that one.
I think the key actually in hindsight is actually to come up with a title that allows you, that actually the first response is, if you don't watch the video, you're gonna hate it.
Yes.
And so it actually allows the people to just immediately like, oh, this sucks, and then they didn't watch it, and then, you know, you're like, okay, you actually just wanted to immediately comment on the title. And then if you watch the whole thing, then you're like, okay, I get it. So the initial golden, I think that's what they're doing. They just want to get the money.
Yeah. This video was kindly supported by Eddie, Kris with a K, Lager15, Shenlong, Wisetown, Zachary Carter, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Kris, Dean Tanglis, Doomseer, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, Bot Pounder 420, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or guests to come on my shows? Do you want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs where I might even insult you in a funny or maybe obnoxious manner? Do you want teasers for my upcoming, you know, content, things I'm thinking of, what I might be changing? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions where we go all over the place with the big donators? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is using the Patreon link in the description box below to join the Screwluminati today.